Hey y'all, welcome to the Team LocoFit Roundtable, hosted by me, Laurin Conlon, owner of Team LocoFit. Each week, I'm joined by one of our coaches to dive headfirst into the nutrition, training, mindset, and coaching strategies we use with our clients. If you loved the show, please subscribe, leave us a review, tell a friend, you know the drill. And for more information about coaching, the programs we offer, and additional content, visit teamlocofit.com. All right, and we are back, and I'm with Coach Karina.
Hey guys.
And if you guys listened to Monday's episode, we would highly encourage you to do that first, because it is the...
Goes in order.
Yes, it does go in order. I mean, you can listen to them separately, but it does help, I think. And we basically talked about, how do you know that you're ready? This podcast is about how do you know that you're ready to start a diet. So the last one was, okay, where should you be at the end of a reverse diet or a maintenance phase or just any kind of phase where you're getting really consistent. So it's just a quick overview. What were some of the things that we talked about for that?
So definitely want to be in a good place as far as your relationship with food. Don't want to have any issues there before starting a fat loss phase. Want to be in a good position in your relationship with your body. Want to make sure that all of your blood markers are good. Don't want to have any hormonal issues before starting a fat loss phase, in which naturally you're going to start depleting yourself of nutrients. Your body, it's not going to be good for that. Being a good place body composition wise, making sure that you're at a healthy body fat and you're not starting a fat loss phase or finishing a reverse diet just because you're uncomfortable or haven't put on enough body fat yet. What was another one we mentioned?
Training, performance, and recovery. You want to make sure that that's on point. And also just make sure that you have spent enough time outside of a deficit.
That was the first one.
Of course, this is going to vary from person to person, so it's not really a specific amount of time that we recommend because it is so individualized. But essentially, if you have been either yo-yo dieting for a long time or you've come off of a really strict contest prep or something like that, don't expect to just go right into another diet. Because what ends up happening, and this is just really common, and this is what I used to do too, is you would go through these really intense diets and then your body is obviously primed and in a position to gain a bunch of body fat back. That's what it wants to do, right? After a physique competition, that's what it wants to do. And even after a regular diet, depending on how far away you've gotten from your starting place, right? So depending on kind of where you're at, the metabolic and hormonal adaptations will be pretty high. And then you couple that with a already negative kind of mindset around food, and then you just eat for a few months, and then you go, oh, well, I'm pretty uncomfortable. Well, you haven't really recovered. You haven't restored your lean body mass, which is actually why we see a lot of these adaptations. It's not necessarily always fat mass reductions. It's fat-free mass reductions that can create a lot of these adaptations. So the more that you're depleting your muscle mass, the harder you're going to be hit with these adaptations. And this is very, very common when people either don't diet properly or they don't take enough time in between or they don't actually build enough muscle with training and food and all that. So all those things are things to take into consideration. And then also, how do you know that you're ready to start a diet? Are you ready to mentally commit to this? And this is something that I
specifically for contest prep.
Even regular.
Or if you have a lot of weight to lose.
Just in general, right? So a perfect example, I had a client who was, reached out and said, hey, I've been pretty consistent, a little off and on. I'm looking to get, we'd worked together before for a long time. She's like, I'm looking to just kind of get some more accountability again, get some consistency, and after the holidays, probably diet. I was like, perfect. We'll start now. We'll build things back up. We'll get some consistency. We'll, have untracked meals for the holidays, and then we can start. And honestly, she's like, I definitely want to start at some point. She's like, but I've been feeling so good with all this that I'm just excited to keep, I'm actually just excited about this part of the process right now too. Which I think is so important, to not just be like, oh, I'm just trying to rush this to get out of this so I can just diet next. Now, again, I understand that especially if you're a competitive athlete, you want to compete again because it's fun. And there is a difference of people who want to compete because they enjoy it and people who compete because they are compelled to do so because it's the only thing that's going on in their life. Huge distinction. Very, very big distinction. And as a coach, if you are asking the right questions and you are having open dialogue with your clients and you are paying attention to these signs and symptoms and whatever they're talking about, you'll be able to distinguish the two.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that a super important thing in aspect of, making sure you're starting a diet because you are doing it for the right reasons and not because you hate your body, is just something I read, or I've read like 10 case studies over the last 2 weeks on competitive bodybuilders, and in every single one of these, at like 20 plus weeks after the diet has ended, or the contest prep has ended, they always came back to baseline. So just know that, especially if you're a competitive athlete or if you're competing for the first time, you're going to get down to a body fat percentage that you're not going to maintain, and have that expectation to know that this is going to be temporary. If you're looking to be a competitive athlete, like, that's normal for you to lose so much body fat and then allow your body to kind of regain that weight. Obviously, we don't want any crazy harsh rebounds, which I've definitely experienced, but just setting that expectation of ahead of time, you know, that the body fat I'm going to lose is not going to be sustainable. I'm going to do it for competitive reasons, for sport, and, you know, following it up with getting back to normal baseline measurement.
Yeah, and I would say that honestly, I think that the clients who do the best as athletes are the clients who understand that these are very distinct processes.
Yeah.
You know, getting down to stage lean level body fat feels horrible, but to some people looks great, right? But as much as somebody might like how they look, and they know what that feels like now moving forward, the people who really want to be the best competitor possible are willing to take those off seasons and are willing to push on the other end, to be slightly uncomfortable on the other end of it. The people who are obsessed with competing, who have nothing else that they have going on, who are not doing it to be more competitive, but they're doing it because they're trying to fill some kind of a void, or they're trying to like work through something and they're using that as the outlet, then they're never satisfied with anything besides super lean.
And I'll point myself out here. I was definitely one of those people, whereas at first I got into competing because I've been an athlete my whole life. But then after a while, I just felt more so like compelled to compete, to stay like relevant, to feel like it would like fill a void in my life. And then when I got leaner, like I couldn't even enjoy like being lean because I felt crappy all the time, you know? And so I look back at pictures now, and I'm sure everyone can relate to this, be like, oh man, I was like so lean there. Like, why didn't I realize how lean I was? Like, oh, why wasn't I happy? Because that's not gonna make anyone happy.
You know that meme where it's like the like glass thing of water that's like leaking something, and there's like the guy who comes and like slaps the piece of paper on there. It's always like a meme template, so like, you know, there's like this huge
I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember like what the memes are, but I know the photo.
That photo. So it's like, you know, you and your negative thoughts and your negative feelings and whatever, like you're just trying to like slap competing on there, but like really there's like this huge thing like building up behind the surface, and at some point, you know, you're gonna have to address that.
I think my favorite one of that meme is like when it's like gushing out, and it's like me eating like crap like for like 20 days in a row, and then like it's like a small piece of paper and it's like 20 minutes of cardio. It's not gonna but
just slap that on there. It's like, oh, you know, you have all these negative thoughts about yourself and all these, you know, you have, you know, maybe nothing else going on, and this is like, you know, you're using this as a validation, or, you know, to try and cope with something, and then you just slap, bikini competition on it, right, or whatever, or even just diet, and we all do that because it's comfortable. And I have another client that I was talking with, and, you know, there's been a lot going on in her life, like most people listening. There's just a lot of crazy things happening for a lot of people on an individual and a kind of global level, and she was basically having this really hard week, and was, you know, she had just finished a long prep, and, you know, she's somebody who's a very competitive athlete. She understands gaining weight, she understands taking time off, but she is a competitor and she loves to compete. So partly when she says, I miss competing, that obviously is part of it, just because she misses the aspect of competing. But the other part of it was like, man, I really wish I could just be back in prep again to like help my mindset with all this stuff. And I was like, you want to be back in prep right now because prep is an easy control mechanism, right? Basically, when you're in a diet or a really hardcore prep, everything has to be scheduled around that, right? And I actually find that myself, up to a certain degree, and most people are actually hyper productive in those periods. And you're like, oh my god, I get so much done, right? Like I used to be, you almost feel like a super person, right?
And you're just ultra structured.
First of all, you're pumped with adrenaline because your body is like super lean. But outside of all of the adrenaline dump, you're also just, everything has to be taken care of. It's a no options mentality, right? So when you are in a position like that, people can become obsessed with competing just because they're like, well, my life felt so much better, and now without competing, my life's a disaster. And I'm like, no, it's not the competing. It's
the structure.
It's the structure. And you can create that with anything that you're doing. Yeah. So she was like, oh my gosh, that really put it into perspective. And, things that she knew, but sometimes you just need to hear it a different way.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for people to understand that. So, all right, let's actually get to the point of this one. So, starting point with food. So you're ready. You listen to the last podcast. You know where you should be ending things. Like, you're good to go. Okay, did all the right stuff. Now, where should you be starting with your food, or just in general? What should be some starting factors?
So generally, shouldn't be starting out hungry. Food should be high enough that you feel satiated. One thing I'm kind of hesitant to say, and maybe you can chime in on this, is I personally, and your opinion might be different, I personally don't feel like everyone, I don't think that people should be like constantly force feeding themselves and like overeating in that sense. Like, you should feel pretty comfortable. However, there are some individuals who are typically more ectomorphic that do need to force feed themselves to maintain their weight. I feel like those individuals are a bit more few and in between, but for the most part, food should be high enough that you're not hungry all the time. I mean, it's okay for you to like get hungry, say if you go more than like your normal fasting window between meals, but you should be plenty nourished before you go into a phase where you're going to start depleting yourself of nutrients.
Satiated.
Yeah, satiated. And food should just be high enough that you are feeling healthy. You shouldn't be going in restricting. You shouldn't be going in, feeling like you're not eating enough. And I think that will really reveal itself in your training. That will reveal yourself in endurance with, training in general. And just how you're feeling mentally as well. And you can kind of tell in like your skin and just energetically throughout the day, like, are you feeding your body enough and quality food too?
Yeah. And hunger is such a subjective rating, and it's something that we ask obviously during our updates, and you kind of, as somebody checks in every week, you get to kind of build this almost like, resume is not the word, but it's like a fuck, I'm not gonna think of the word now, of course. You're building something. You're building a case for this client, right? So okay, normally their hunger is around X, right? And you have it takes them
like a profile.
Yes, a profile. So I need to I don't know. This is how my brain works. Okay. Anyways,
we're gonna take over the grenade.
So you're building a profile, right? So after several weeks, you can typically, see how somebody's gonna respond. And I have some clients who are always hungry. Doesn't matter how much food I give them, doesn't matter how much flexibility they have. They're just naturally hungrier people.
Yeah.
On the other end of the spectrum, I have some people who, no matter how little they're eating, they're just not hungry.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a big hunger response, and then also hunger is incredibly mental, right? Like, there's a huge mental component with hunger, because that, like, hunger and cravings get kind of blurry, right?
Also, really quickly to touch on, because I recently started working with someone who was like, I'm just always going to be hungry. Like, I've just always had a really big appetite. And I'm like, but have you ever actually eaten enough though? Or are you just like always restricting? And for her, it was more mental hunger, because she was always
tell yourself that you're...
Yeah, and I'm just like, I just have a really big appetite. Well, do you really have a big appetite? Or just have you never given yourself the opportunity to eat to satiety and actually like allow yourself to have normal meals out and things like that? And she was one of those people who I was like, let's have some untracked meals, let's kind of push food. And she's like, I've never intentionally like tried to eat more. And now she's like, it's amazing how like I'm not hungry anymore. Like, I always thought I just had this really insatiable appetite. And
now again, some people like myself,
right?
It's not even that I have a big appetite. I can just eat a lot, right? It's not even like, oh my god, because I'm so food focused all day. It's just like, I can eat my normal meals, or I can sit down and have a big ass meal, right? Like, it's just, and of course this has gone through phases, and I've gotten to a place where I can really regulate things now, like much, much better than before. But I would still say that, again, I'm somebody who has a faster metabolism, has a big appetite.
Yeah, I'm definitely someone who now I can't throw down like I used to, because I don't restrict like I used to. Whereas like now I'm like,
So that mental component is completely different, and you actually feel satiated. But we do look at hunger, of course, to see, how is somebody digesting their food, and and that can, of course, lend itself to the digestion questions that we ask too. But in any case, so say you want your food to start off in a good kind of even place, like you want to feel just kind of even all around, satiated, etc. So when you first start, everybody always wants to know, okay, well, what are you going to cut? What are you going to do? And part of this, again, is that profile that you've built with a client, if you've worked with them for other diet periods, or you've just worked with them in general.
Yeah, that's why it's really helpful to work with someone a little bit before the prep starts, so you have an idea.
130%.
Before game time, like you understand like how their
especially
body
for
works.
a contest prep. Not even an option to not do that.
At the least 4 weeks,
yes, and that's even I do that with people, even if I know them. I'm like, hey, we got to do like a month of this, or if they really got their stuff together, I'm like, all right, like let's kind of start around here.
Yeah.
Be tightening these things up, and then we can start. But generally speaking, it's like, hey, it's not even just what they're doing, it's also like getting used to the check-ins and getting used to the accountability and getting used to because when you don't have somebody that you're sending stuff to, like it's just easy to be like, oh well, whatever, so that's a whole kind of thing in and of itself. But so the first adjustment, everybody wants to know, it's going to depend on the person, and this I've changed my mind about, or not my mind, but my practice with this a lot over time. And when I first started, it was like, well, be as conservative as possible, and you want to like squeeze as much out of every intake as possible. And I still abide by all of those principles. I literally made a post about this like the other week. I still 100% agree with that. Besides the first drop, like we talked about a little bit on the last podcast, if you are just throwing out arbitrary numbers, you drop 150, 200 calories. It's probably not enough. Your body does need like hey, this is a signal. We've started a diet. We've started a deficit. And doesn't mean that you're slashing from 300 carbs to 50. Not what I'm saying either. But there does need to be some kind of a significant thing. And I've changed my approach with this too before, or over time, where I used to be a lot more lenient with, hey, let's do refeeds. Like let's have these high days when we're first starting. But I found that, first it was just making fat loss harder because things weren't, just moving as effectively. And when somebody's body fat is higher, the risk of muscle mass is a lot less. So you don't have to have as much food when you're first starting. Whereas particularly if we're talking about a competitive client, we want to get fat loss rolling, we want to get things chipping away, and then we can add in more food later when they're at that, kind of place where it's easier to lose muscle mass. Because we really want to avoid that. Yeah,
and I think that just is also a really perfect setup for not drawing out the fat loss phase too long, being ready ahead of time, potentially reversing into a show, which is like really nice. Like if you can do that. Not everyone can, but like that's definitely like the ideal.
The gold standard. 100% the gold standard. But even if you are, somebody who's not competing at all and you're just looking to start a fat loss phase, understand that when you first start off, those first few weeks, you're typically going to see better progress if you're a little bit more aggressive, and then you can add things in. And for Gen Pop clients, honestly, a lot of times what I do now is I do keep just untracked meals, and instead of a refeed, I'll be like, hey, let's do one untracked meal, or maybe two, depending on the person, how much they were eating before and whatever. And that honestly is just mentally satiating enough because we've already been doing that in the off season, so it's super easy for them to do. Say, hey, hit these targets beforehand, go have this meal. And there's even some clients I have where it's like 1 or 2 full untracked days, and then the other days are just tracked. So it really, there is no one perfect way to do this, but do understand that anytime that you're starting, you want to make sure that protein is still high. You're going to make the adjustments from carbs and fats, but it needs to be kind of a kick in the ass for your body to go, oh, okay, I'm going to drop. And also, one more caveat here. The more weight you have to lose, the faster you lose the weight. When you have less weight to lose, you're not going to drop it as quickly.
Right.
So if you say your target, say you're not a competitive client, you're just a general pop client, you're just trying to, tighten up. You just want to lose some body fat and maintain it. It's very different than when you're like, wow, I have 50 pounds to lose in order for me to get to a just remotely healthy body composition. That person is going to lose weight a lot faster. And they should, because they have more of it, right? But if you are already in a normal weight range setting, and you're just trying to get a little bit leaner, and you have less to lose, don't expect it to just fly off, and don't beat yourself up if you only the first few weeks you're only down a few pounds. It's actually really good. That's actually better. And the slower that we do this, to some degree. You don't want to be dragging it up forever.
Yeah.
But, you know, the slow chipping away process makes it a lot more manageable, which helps us avoid the after diet rebound, which is what we're trying to avoid here, because losing the weight is not the problem. It's afterwards. If you can't keep that weight off, why did we even engage in this diet in the first place?
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, I think that's a really good point as far as starting points with food.
And then cardio.
Yeah. So for cardio, also,
I can't do like
don't want to be doing tons of cardio to start out, because I've always seen cardio as a tool to adjust the deficit. When you don't really want to touch food, we can always adjust calorie expenditure to continue to create that deficit. Now, I think where coaches might vary and where I'd love to get, I mean, I think I already know what you usually do, is what would you focus more on starting out? Obviously, after you've made that initial adjustment with cardio and food, are you someone who will lean toward more like adding cardio or cutting food?
Cutting food is definitely my preferred method, particularly for a physique athlete. So if we're talking about somebody who is getting on stage, the least amount of cardio that we can do, the better somebody's physique generally looks. The priority for a physique athlete is going to be calorie deficit with the diet, training intensity, so lifting weights to maintain muscle mass, and then cardio to increase the deficit. That is the last thing that I want to change. Now, it doesn't mean that people aren't doing it, and some people definitely need more than others.
Yeah.
But I've also seen not just them look better during the diet, but afterwards, I generally, you know, you can over cardio somebody for like a prep, maybe 2. It stops working, and the rebound is so bad. And the few times that I've done that with people, it's a fucking disaster afterwards. So it's almost not worth it, you know. And I've had to have conversations with clients who we've done that, and I'm like, listen,
well, because you can't sustain it like afterward.
And just some people just don't respond well to it. And typically, unless somebody's very, very muscular, like the more muscular a client is, the more cardio that they can do, because they preserve muscle easily.
Right.
But like I said before, most of the adaptations that you're seeing is not necessarily from the body fat changes, it's mostly from the lean body mass losses. So if you're already somebody who has trouble keeping muscle on, more cardio you do, the more adaptations we're going to see, particularly after.
Right.
So there are people that I can hammer cardio on, but they're generally the people who are a little bit more endo, a little more muscular, and that's not really their issue. It's losing fat that's the issue.
Yeah.
So, and then also, you know, obviously there are going to be people, especially in a general pop situation, where, you know, maybe they just like doing cardio, they like being, you know, more active, and I'm like, all right, well, you know,
that works out.
That's fine, because that's your goals. You know, you're not trying to get on stage to, you know, have diamond shaped glutes. So if you don't want to do that, this might be slightly less optimal, but what does that matter, right? Like it's all about enjoying that process too.
And if you're able to stick to it, like if someone wants to do that much cardio, then why not?
Now, if they're using it as a way to like
eat more
fuel
food.
some kind of exercise addiction, or they're trying to, you know, keep something else under wraps, like that's when you kind of start to see the red flags,
right?
Which, you know, again, is part of the coaching process, that you need to just ask the right questions and actually listen.
Yeah.
So we don't want people doing that for that reason, or ineffectively using cardio. You know, if they're like, oh my god, I love Orange Theory, or I love these kind of classes, I'm going to do one every day. No. Hard fucking no. Your body will be trashed, right? Now, can you still do that twice a week? Sure. Yeah. Right. So it's one of those things that you just have to be able to balance, and just have a regular, you know, conversation with your client, and just, you know, be really honest about that. So cardio is certainly a tool, and especially if you're a physique athlete, that is not the first line of defense for me personally. And
I'm definitely on like in the same boat as far as like I'd rather move food first than to.
Now at some point, you know, you can only go somewhere. You know, you're like, this is pretty rough. But the worst rebounds I've seen as a coach,
like overdoing cardio,
are the overdoing cardio time, like the preps that I've done that with people, and it just, like I said,
my
you can do it once.
My worst rebound was when I was doing like 2.5 hours of cardio a day.
Well, yeah.
Obviously my calories, but no, I've seen the same thing in other individuals. I can think of like I can literally think of like 10 people right now, but
and And
after I'm just like, oh, you just look like a totally different person now. Like you don't even.
And it's not gonna be good.
Way past baseline. Yeah, no, it's gonna.
It's not gonna be good in a few months. Now, I had to work up to a fair amount of cardio for my preps, but it still was within reason, and I was doing mostly low intensity, and that worked really well for me. If somebody's over here, doing crazy intervals on the step mill 6 days a week for an hour and a half. Be ready afterwards for what's going to happen, because it's going to be pretty brutal. So if you can just keep your activity up and keep your kind of low intensity stuff going, again, for a physique athlete, that is going to be optimal. Now, we have a few questions about this too.
Yeah.
So should you be more focused on dropping food or adding cardio?
Okay, sorry, I already talked about that.
Hey, we already answered that one. How realistic is it for people to build muscle at the beginning of a diet? So, we always see the outliers, and they exist. There are people who literally build muscle while dieting, and you're like, wow, I hate you.
Wish.
I wish. I can't even build muscle, not a diet. But, obviously those people deal with their own set of challenges just in a different way.
Yeah.
So I would say that there's always going to be those people, and, typically those are going to be the people who have
a harder time losing body fat too.
They're going to have a hard time losing body fat, but also they're just going to have these crazy physiques, and those people exist, and you look at somebody and go, oh my God, they started training 2 years ago. How do they look like that? I've been lifting for
25 years.
Hey, that's just their genetics. They look better. You know what I mean? And there's always going to be those people who eat, fucking McDonald's every day, and they have abs and they're, right? But there's a whole other bunch of issues involved with that we don't need to talk about. But most people, 99.9% of people, are not going to be able to gain muscle while dieting if they're actually in a deficit.
Yeah. I would say the potential in the first few weeks is definitely greater.
Yes.
If you've spent enough time in the reverse diet and eaten enough in the reverse diet, you can take advantage of that small starting point where your body kind of still has that leftover energy and all those things to train really hard. But as far as getting deep into the diet, likely not going to happen.
Yeah. And like we said, one of the most important things about a diet is being able to manage how much muscle mass that you're losing, and the best ways to not just rapidly lose muscle mass. Well, one, have a good foundation. Two, continue to resistance train intensely. Focus on your recovery as much as you can. Pre and post workout nutrition, that kind of stuff matters much more when you're in a calorie deficit. Sleep, hydration, all these kinds of things. And then also just intelligent with your diet. If you're just slashing food, you're barely eating any protein, of course you're going to be sore and you're not going to feel good, and so you really have to take all those things into consideration, and maintaining muscle mass is really the number one thing. And we had a really good response on the podcast with Dr. Laurin, and I think it was such an important message for me to get out, and I love how she packages it as the muscle-centric medicine is what she likes to call it, right? And that's her trademark, and I think it's so great because it focuses the conversation on muscle instead of adipose tissue or weight or anything else, because it really is true. Yes, there are people who are over fat and they are too fat and they are unhealthy, but really a huge problem that we have is people are under muscled, and that is creating a whole host of issues. And when you're under muscled and overly fat, this is a really bad breeding grounds for metabolic diseases. And people hear muscle and protein and lifting weights and they go, I don't want to look like a bodybuilder, I'm just trying. No, we're not saying look like a bodybuilder. Trust me, you're not going to look like a bodybuilder if you eat protein 3 times a day and go to the gym 4 times a week. You know what I mean?
I wish.
You're just not.
I would definitely be way more jacked than I am right now.
Exactly. You're not. You're actually going to have the physique more likely that you want.
Yeah.
And you're just going to be a healthier person overall. So maintaining muscle mass is so important. Doesn't matter if you're a physique competitor or you're just looking to, get in shape or whatever you're deeming as your goal. It doesn't matter. It's going to be so crucial. And I think that that's just a underrepresented piece, because people are either talking about weight loss, not factoring in, body composition and muscle mass, or they're like, oh, just stay where you're at. It's we need to have a more nuanced discussion here.
Muscle mass is so beneficial to metabolic health and so different in so many different aspects.
And it's very hard to build. It's not like an accident that you build any muscle and that you're metabolically healthy. You got to try. Yeah. And you're not just going to look like, Ronnie Coleman if you start lifting weights. And I think that that's what people think. And it's Sure. There's that one person who gains muscle mass naturally in a diet. Yeah, sure. Yeah. You're not that person. Yeah. Okay, I'll just say it. You're probably not that person. You would have known a long time ago that you were that person. You know what I mean? So
probably not.
It's like you're gonna have to try a little bit harder, and not even try to like. You're not gonna be like, oh, look how muscular I am. It's just you're gonna have a little bit more muscle. You're going to feel better. You're gonna achieve that look that you actually want. And so many people tell me, oh, I just need to get leaner. It's like maybe. Yeah. But you also just need more muscle.
Because you'll look leaner with more muscle.
Yeah. And the people that you're showing me or telling me that you want to look like, they have more muscle. That's what it is. It's not less body fat. It's more muscle. So, lastly, how much strength and muscle can someone expect to lose throughout? So this kind of ties into that part. It's going to be very individual based on how far you're getting from your kind of set point, which is very different for everybody, and I'll use myself as an example after. And it's also going to matter how you diet and how you train. Are you intelligently training? Are you using progressive overload? Are you just kind of going in there and doing what you feel? If you're doing that, which is also fine, just expect that you're going to feel weaker, and you're probably not going to be able to hold on to strength. The people who hold on to strength when they're dieting are people who program properly for strength. Yeah. You can't expect to be strong if you're not programming for it.
Also, I think a big one for performance and training throughout a diet is like peri-workout nutrition needs to be on par.
On point. That's the kind of stuff that in an off season or maintenance, it matters much less. You wake up, you feel fueled. You go to bed, you feel good. Like, sure, you use caffeine throughout the day to, because you like it or you want it or whatever, but it's not, a necessity. When I'm prepping, it's like,
the
all right.
timing, the macros.
Yeah, the pre-workout meal, the pre-workout.
That I use.
The intra carbs, 10 grams of intra-workout carbs when you're dieting can literally feel like jet fuel, know? And now I'd be like, cool, I just drank 10 grams. Like, it wouldn't matter.
Like, nothing happened.
Like, got plenty of glycogen stores, we're good.
Yeah.
Plenty of adipose tissue, we're good. But in that situation, so different. Yeah. So going away from the set point, right? So no matter what, no matter if I nail those, all of that, like my recovery is on point, my sleep is good, my hydration, my food timing, my training programming, all of it's great. Some point, if I'm very far from my kind of settling point, I'm gonna start to see issues, and I'm just always gonna feel kind of shitty. Yeah. So for me, I've been maintaining now around like 155, and I typically compete. I have to get under 130. The weight will fluctuate, but let's just say no lower than 125. But let's just say that for that number. Usually it's like 127. But for easy math, that's about 30 pounds. 25, 30 pounds.
How tall are you?
So tall, Karina.
Okay, well,
I'm 5'7".
I know people are going to be like, well, Lauren gets down to this weight. And I'm like, y'all don't know how tall she is. She is tall.
Yes. So. Yes. Okay, I'm 5'7".
I feel like that's very important because you are going to like, anyways. And she has a lot of muscle. Okay, got
So for me, I can get down to a certain place, and it's hard and it's challenging. But when I get to a certain weight, which really is just correlating with a certain body fat, it's not just the weight, but it's easier to track weight than it is to track body fat. When I get to a certain place, things kind of just go downhill. Doesn't matter what I'm doing. Training just kind of doesn't feel very good. And that's normal, and that's expected. And that's because I used to be chasing this really extreme goal for that, and it was necessary to do that. Yeah. Now, if I were to diet now, I would certainly be stopping. Well, first of all, I'd be stopping before that period for a lot of other reasons, because I don't need to be that lean for the fuck of it. But I would be stopping before I got there, because that would be really not conducive to like long-term goals, right? Long-term health.
Yeah. And also like your current performance goals.
Well, yeah, performance goals are superseding my physique goals, which is why I haven't been dieting, right? And I'm actually like at a place where I'm like, all right, like we just did my body comp recently, and I'm in a pretty good spot. Like I feel like I'm like in a decent area. Yeah.
And one thing I've also experienced is kind of off topic, but like when performance starts getting really good, body composition starts getting really good too. So yes, it's also the benefit of not dieting too much and too long. Both
of those can just kind of continue to improve, and it's hard to get to this place because people want to diet beforehand. I honestly was so over dieting basically for the past 20 years that I finally decided I was like, I'm done with this for a while. You know what I mean? Like, I'm literally not doing this. And now I'm finally at a place where certainly I'm not as lean as I used to be, but I'm in a place where my body comp has settled, I think, in a pretty good area. I have definitely filled out muscularly, and most importantly right now I feel good with lifting and jiu-jitsu, which is what I'm trying to do. So
same. I would say, like, with just all the focusing that I have been doing on performance, I don't really ever step on the scale right now, but just seeing where I'm able to maintain, and body composition too, I'm like very comfortable here. And just, it's really nice to feel like I'm not working as hard as I have had to in the past to maintain here, and I attribute that mostly to just being healthy enough to train hard. And it's a hard mentality, because everybody, again, like we talked about in the last one, you want to strive towards something. So for many people, using a diet as a way to strive towards a goal is what they gravitate towards. Whether you want to say that that's societal programming, whether you want to say that that's something internal going on, whatever it might be, it just happens to be easier, particularly for women, for us to do that, right? Doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean it's wrong, it just is what it is. And I find that most people find that easier to gravitate to, versus there are so many other things that we're working on outside of a deficit, like that both of us have done, you know, in these, you know, year for you, 2 years for me, that we've been able to work towards, that have kept us focused and not dieting. But those are less glitzy and less fun because they are much slower. So a diet is very gratifying because you put in a certain amount of work and typically you get some kind of result. Of course, there's going to be variances there. But if we say, hey, you know, I want to repair my relationship with food and get my performance to a good place, and, you know, hey, I want to be able to, you know, eat more one day and things don't fluctuate a ton. You know what? That might take 2 years of not being in a diet. And you say that to a lot of people and they're like, holy shit, what am I going to do? It's like, we have so many things we can do. But it's not fun. It's that really boring, slow work. You're not getting that, like, weekly gratification of hit a new low on the scale. You know,
it's really fun to do that.
Visibly leaner. Yeah, that's great. And then obviously, like, the big one at the end, I could get all dolled up and get on stage and then, like, have fun with my friends and things like that. But yeah, I would definitely say, like, this part has definitely been worth it.
It always is. It's just getting there. And I think sometimes people have to get to a kind of a rough space before they can do it, you know. You kind of have to
hit. For me.
Yeah, that's what I did. You know, finally I was like, I'm done with this for a while. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just so done. So yeah, I think that kind of sets it up for, okay, what should you do when you're looking to start a diet? You know, where should you be? What should your expectations be? And the last thing that I'll close with is, I think that it's really important to have realistic expectations about the diet and understand that there's going to be fluctuations. And one of the most frustrating things as a coach is the fact that sometimes we can be making changes and somebody's not dropping, and other times we're not making any changes and they're continuing to drop. And that's really hard to explain to people, right? Because they're like, well, if I do this, then this should happen. And it's like, textbook, it should. But oftentimes it doesn't. And there's so much variation. And the thing is, there's so many things going on in everybody's life that affects their body composition. So those fluctuations, especially depending on what is going on in your life, can be just a lot greater. So I think just going into a diet with realistic expectations, and I always say this, you know, the slower the better, and it's probably going to take longer than you think. If somebody says, hey, I want to do a prep in this many weeks, I'm like, oh, let's tack on a little bit more, most likely. Right? Like, just if everything goes great, cool.
I think adding more time is a good buffer for, like, say you get sick, say you have like a week where you slip up, or something happens in, like, family life where you can't get to the gym, can't diet, whatever. But yeah, I think that setting expectations is huge for just obviously also being realistic about how much weight can we lose in this amount of time. And I think that that's a big one for people, like, especially if you're a first-time competitor. Don't expect to go from 20-something% body fat down to like 8 the first time. You know, it takes some time, but that conversation with your coach ahead of time of setting those expectations. Okay, how long is this going to take me? How much body fat can I realistically lose?
And if you are somebody who maybe is, you know, has a significant amount of weight to lose, right? Or you've tried to lose the same, you know, 20-30 pounds, and we're not talking about a competitor now, we're talking about a, you know, just Gen Pop client. It most likely is going to be more beneficial to do this in cycles. And that's what I have a lot of clients do. And again, this is longer, but it is much better. So, like, let's just say these, again, are arbitrary numbers. You started at 160, and to be healthy for you metabolically and hormonally and physically, you should probably get around 130, 135, right? Again, hypothetical numbers. We're not going from 160 to 130 is possible, but it's going to be really hard to maintain that. So what would be better instead now is like, maybe we go from 160 to 150, 145, we reverse again, so we add a little bit of weight back, and then we come back down again, and then we'll add food and we'll go back up, and then we'll come back down, and then at some point we're going to be able to now maintain at this lower weight. That might take 3 years.
Yeah.
But how long did it take to get there, right? Yeah. So if you do that, you'll actually make long-term progress, instead of saying, okay, I can lose these 30, because yeah, you can lose 30 pounds, fine, but you've been trying to lose these 30 pounds for what, 10 years? So if you've been trying to do this unsuccessfully, we need to try a new method. And the better method is going to be to slowly do it and to kind of inch your way down in this stepwise pattern. And then you'll actually be able to maintain it. And then it won't be such a shock to your body. Now you can actually be at 130 and your body isn't like sounding the fucking alarms. Oh. It's like, oh, hey, like we're pretty comfortable here.
Yeah, and I would say that's also known as kind of like creating a new set point. And for me, for example, anecdotally, it's taken me 5 years to set a new set point that's 25 pounds lower. So yeah, 15 to 20 pounds lower. So I think like 5 years ago I was not eating very much either, but my body was stuck around like 150, 155. And now very comfortable at 128, 130 these days. Don't really have to work to do it, to be honest. Obviously, like I train a lot, but I'm not like dieting, I'm not killing myself, and I'm not doing hours of cardio. So it is possible, it just takes time. You can go get ice cream, you can go have a drink, you can go to these things, and it's not like we can go and have dinner or go do something and it's not like, oh my gosh, my weight went crazy and then now I'm gonna binge eat or I'm gonna do all this stuff. Like, yeah, no, but so different. The thing is that it took 5 years for me to get here, and it's definitely worth it. But yeah, and we essentially, like, I did it in cycles, and then, you know, we've kind of finished out those cycles together, and it's been really nice.
Yeah, so if you guys are looking to start, make sure that you've done all the right things in your off season or your maintenance phase, and then, you know, you are set yourself up for success. And then this is how we would recommend starting either a contest prep or a fat loss phase. And yeah, so I think that's all. If you guys have any other questions, let us know. You can go to teamlocofit.com to apply for coaching, read any articles that we've written, check out the other podcasts, everything that's on there. And we will talk to you guys next week.
See ya.